All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Umar Khan, and we have Dr. Sharam Maroof. He is joining us, and he is in his program, he is involved in residency candidate selection, also interviews individuals, and we will be going over some most common questions that you are likely to experience during your interview, and that, of course, we know is all going to be done remotely and through video. And we have a couple of candidates who are joining us, and we hope to have a very interactive session. And we also encourage people to raise their hands. And if you have a question prepared, we already have a few questions prepared. It will be great if you can step up to the plate and be confident, show your potential, or at least, give an answer. And we will be more than happy to recommend, okay, you can potentially make this improvement or potentially that improvement, or reframe your answer in a certain manner. We will also be looking to see how you present yourself within a video and how you position yourself in front of the camera. And that will be, I think, essential when you do actually go through your interview process. All right, so anybody, please let me know in the messages if you would want to talk about an answer that you have prepared. One thing I would like to say is that the one question that I would want everybody to step up to the plate is about, tell me about yourself, because that is probably going to be the first question that you are going to be asked, or in any manner that is going to come up, and you will have to talk about that a little bit. And if that answer is fluent and that answer is coherent, and if that answer is meaningful, then you will be leading your own interview and you will be guiding your interviewer through this process. So make sure you have that question ready. And what better way to practice it than right over here? Dr. Sharam, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess that's a good idea. We can start. And if anyone is volunteering, we can ask you this question and we can start from there. Or we can then start with general tips and general questions.
All right, I think we did touch on that question in the last interview, so we won't actually go over it ourselves, because in the last session, we already had discussed that. And somebody can refer to our last session that is on the Facebook page as well as on the YouTube channel, so you can check that out. But we will be continuing with a few other questions that we had listed previously. All right, so, okay, so let's, a very important question that comes to mind, and that is a very important question, because as foreign medical graduates, we tend to apply everywhere, and we tend to go wherever we get an interview, right? But a very important question is that they could ask is, what do you like about our program? And why do you want to be part of this residency program? Dr. Aftab, can you give me a brief description of, brief answer of why you feel that you should be, why you like our program? Dr. Sharam, how would you approach this question?
So for this question, you would have to have done research on the program that you're applying to. And again, this was something that we recommended last time, that you, everywhere you go to, you make sure that you research the program, make sure that you research the faculty, at least the program director, associate program director, and the chairman. So from there, from researching those individuals as well as researching those programs, you can get a better understanding of what the program is like. So do your best that answer is not very generic, that you, oh, this is a program, this is very friendly and things like that, and be very specific to that program. For example, there are many programs in the US who have their specialized, environment about. Some are very, friendly to IMGs. They have a very good. Most of the programs that you're going to apply to are going to be IMG friendly, anyways. So that is one thing that I would recommend is, like, I like the environment of the program. I've seen that the candidates in the program are from across the US and everywhere from the world, and the environment seems to be very friendly, and I like that. And I think the people I'm going to work with are going to be very important for me, and I personally feel that I want to be working in a likable environment. So you can mention something like that, which is very generic, But honestly, other than that, it has to be very specific. I don't I don't think about anything else that you can say unless you have something very specific to that program. You could generally say I've heard good things about this program. If you know someone, you say I've heard good things of the program, and I myself concur that this program appears to be very friendly yet challenging, and it will help me grow as a resident.
All right, yeah, definitely. So I believe we have a comment in the comments area also. But just to, if I can have a jab at this. So yeah, definitely mention some particular aspects that is not general. So for example, if let's say they have a couple of fellowships that you are interested in, and if you are genuinely interested in one of those fellowships, then mention that hey, I was looking up, and of course in your briefing, you mentioned that there's a critical care fellowship, and definitely I am looking forward in the future to further my career as a critical care physician in the future, or it could be GI, it could be oncology, whatever it is. So you give them a valid reason. That's let's say that is one of the things that anybody can bring up, that hey, this is one of the reasons I want to apply for your program and be a resident here, because I feel that this is the future fellowship track that I am looking for, and that certainly attracts me in this program. The second thing you can potentially do is, let's say, for example, if it is in a mountainous area, it has recreational activities, you can mention that I am an outdoor enthusiast. If you are, don't make things up. Don't make things up. Find things wherever you're going to be interviewing, research that place, research that location, and say, okay, yeah, I am an outdoor enthusiast, and I feel that being around in this area will let me explore myself outside of the residency as well. So find something that you can potentially relate to, that you can confidently talk about it. Yes, this is one of the main reasons I want to be in this program.
And one thing that came to mind just because we were talking about this, I want to clarify one common myth that happens. Like, for example, if you are going to a community program, people tend to encourage you, don't say that I want to go to cardiology fellowship and things like that, and say I want to be an internist. And vice versa, if you go to a university program, generally I hear talk about the candidates that they think, oh, because we are going to a university program, we should mention some fellowship. I don't agree with this. If you have a genuine interest in a field like cardiology, GI, pulmonary, any field that you have a genuine interest in, and even if you're going to a community program, you can still mention, yes, I'm enthusiastic about this field. I have done this work, and I want to pursue research in this field, and I want to apply in cardiology. That's perfectly fine. That's a common myth that, oh, community programs, people don't match into fellowships. That's wrong. If they actually want candidates who are hardworking and they end up in fellowships. So it's completely out of context. Yes, you are more likely to match to some extent to a fellowship if you are going to a university program than if you're from a community program, but it's just a more likely. It's not all a non-phenomena.
All right, excellent. So one, Dr. Arham mentioned, is it okay to mention about the architecture, life outside of campus? This question, architecture, like how the campus looks. Well, you could say generally the campus looks nice. That's fine. Architecture, but that's not something that's really a strong point for you to say, oh, okay, just because it looks beautiful, I want to be here. Something more substantial and solid, as we just discussed. All right.
Yeah.
Next.
But it can be related to city. For example, if it's in Chicago, New York, California, LA, you can say, yeah, I would like to live in Chicago, and that's one of the plus. That's fine. But not specifically just because the building looks good. Yeah, but it's in Chicago, it's in New York, it's in a big city that you want to live in. That's fine. If it's in a small city, you can mention, yeah, I've liked living in small cities. I'm from a small city in Pakistan, and I like the life of a small city. So you can spin it either way, in my opinion.
Excellent. All right. So one question that I've seen that people have problems about, it is about tell me about an interesting case, and or a case that you've had experience in the past. A lot of big city programs, let's say New York, Chicago, they will be asking you about, tell me about a case. And I've seen that over the past week or so that candidates have not prepared that well. Dr. Sharam, what would be your take on this?
Well, that has to be a genuine case that you have worked with and you have information about. And I see that question, people get taken aback when that question is asked to them so many times. And US grads, honestly, if you ask them this question, they ace that question. And for some reason, the same question is asked to IMG, and they're so confused because they are picking up jabs that from different cases and just putting it together at that point because they have not prepared. We have done it, interesting cases all over life, but the problem is we have not prepared to how to present that case. That's a problem. Again, the point of this sessions is that you get to know the questions, and I would just encourage you to read up about interesting cases that you have dealt with. Specifically, if you have any case reports in your CV, you should memorize them in and out so that if they ask you an interesting question, you can just refer to your case report and present that.
Yes, definitely. So you should have this question memorized, and you should follow the same structure that we have been doing, let's say from the third year of clinical medical school that we've had. You need to know the chief complaint. You need to say this patient came with a chief complaint of shortness of breath. Then the patient is a 45-year-old female with a past medical history of hypertension, CHF, diabetes. Make sure you have the past medical history. Comes in with the chief complaint. Then you talk about the HPI. Then you talk about the pertinent review systems. Then you talk about the relevant vitals. You talk about the relevant investigations. You talk about your initial conclusions. You talk about, because of this made this case particularly interesting. And we initially were considering that it was likely due to this scenario. However, we had this investigation done, after which the results were this. Because of this, we thought, yes, we may need to revise our diagnosis, and we pursued with this treatment track. Subsequently, the next day, we found this piece of information. And then we started this treatment, the patient did well, et cetera, et cetera. And it was a straightforward case. However, it had a little bit of peculiarity. And then you say, this is why I consider this interesting. The other thing you can consider is that sometimes it's probably okay to find, let's say a rare disease. Let's say in Pakistan, everybody probably had an example of POTS disease or tuberculosis that people don't have here in the US. You can definitely, talk about something that's a little bit, different, or a disease that's not that common in the US. You can say if you had a patient with malaria or anything else, or dengue fever, you can talk about it. The interviewer, if the interviewer is not Pakistani or Indian, they may find it a little bit interesting. Or it could be a case that you can say that I want to talk about this case because this is the case where I took the patient from the beginning of admission and I discharged the patient. And this was a critical care patient or an ICU patient that I feel honored to have served. It could be anything. But
and I completely agree with that. And I just want to caution about one thing. When you're presenting a case or in any scenario, don't try to make yourself a superstar. Try to give credit to someone else that was in your team, or present in a way that we discovered. Get rid of I in that interview. Every time you're presenting something, we did this and we found out, or my colleague was brilliant and he pointed out this thing that I had initially missed. And later on, I figured out that was the critical sign for that disease and things like that. So again, you are a hero in your story, but that doesn't hold true when you're doing an interview.
All right. Yeah, definitely. Good point, Dr. Sharam. All right. So there's a comment by Dr. Said Akil Heather. When is it appropriate to bring up the interviewer's own research or interests when they invite you to ask questions at the end? Yes, definitely. You can ask them at the end when they do ask you, okay, do you have any questions for me? You can ask them that. That could be a question you can ask at the end. That what is your particular, are you involved in any activities? But this could be a little tricky also, because if the person is not involved in research, then they may start saying in negative. You can probably have an open-ended question that can you share something you're excited about that you are particularly involved in this program. So maybe keep it open-ended in case they are not involved in research for some reason. So just keep it open-ended. Yeah. I mean, what do you think, Dr. Sharam?
Yeah, and I think I discussed this before as well. This is a tricky part. For I personally would advise, if you have to talk about research in your own research and your research interests, unless they ask you, of course, if you have to bring it yourself, then it should be in a way that I'm really interested in doing research in this particular field. I wanted to find out, do the residents get any dedicated research time? That's the only question that makes sense that you can ask. It cannot be a generic question. Oh, what kind of research do you do in your hospital? There are so many different type of research that are ongoing in the hospital. That's very generic, and that's kind of useless question. The question that is pertinent to the residents is like, do the residents get any dedicated time? But again, that's a double-edged sword. I would refrain putting this question in community hospitals, to be honest. In research, in university hospitals, definitely go for it. In community hospitals and the one that are really little stringent on the service rather than teaching, I would be careful in asking that question. But yeah, teaching hospitals, go ahead, ask this question. I'm interested in research specifically about this field, blah, blah, blah. And do the residents get any dedicated research time?
All right, excellent.
Dr. Sharam?
Yes, please.
Hi, sounds good. This is Mavish from Chicago. I have a question related to what you have just mentioned, that in a community hospital, we should refrain from discussing about research, right? But I am a research fellow for like 3 years in the Cook County Hospital. And this is my question is, if I'm not expecting any interviews from university program, obviously it would be from some community program if I get, as I'm an old grad. So my question is, how much stress should I give on my research work in a community hospital interview?
No, you should definitely put stress on your and highlight your careers as a researcher. But you don't really have to ask for a dedicated research time. That's my goal of discussing this. For example, in a community hospital, they might not have enough time for you to just sit down and do research for 1 month. If you are a good researcher, you'll find time in your own personal time. For example, after a clinical work, you can put in 1 hour and do research. So you don't really have to have dedicated research time to do research. You can still continue research. And honestly, this community hospital bracket is a very big bracket. Some of the community like Cook County is supposed to be a community program, but Cook County is like a very big research program. Like their residents publish more research than any other university program that I know of. So it's very generic in a sense that when we mention community program, we're talking about really small community hospitals. And even in their program directors really love the candidates who do research. It's not a problem, but they might not have enough resources to give you dedicated research time.
Right. No, my question was about myself mentioning about my research work to that community program.
Definitely mention it. Definitely. That's a positive. They like to have good candidates. They love to have good candidates.
This is from my personal experience. Actually, last year I had an interview from community program. And when I told them about myself, in the end, obviously I came on my research work. That is what I was doing that time. So I had the feeling that they did not like that a lot. When I mentioned my publications, presentation, they just listened to it, but they were not very interested into it. And I got the idea that they thought maybe I'm interested more in research, not into the clinical work. And I mentioned that in my interview that, of course, I want to become a physician, clinician, but this is what I have been doing. And that's why I mentioned it. But this is my sixth sense that they did not like that.
That could be true. Honestly, that could be true. Some of the programs, because they might have had trouble with the residents asking for research time and they didn't really have enough time. So they wanted their residents to be more clinically oriented, and that happens. We understand that part. So the way that you spin it is like, the way that I would advise you to spin it is like, I've been, blessed to have this time and I'm privileged to have this time with research and I'm very good at it. But now I want to be a great clinician and I want to dedicate my time. If you think you're in a small community program and now I'm interested more in learning about clinical work and I want to, become a better physician and clinician. You see what I'm saying? Just spin it in a way that you have done great so that you have two advantages. If they want you to be involved in more research, they should give you some time and you can do research. But if you want you to be more service oriented, you can still be a good asset to them.
Okay, cool.
Honestly, part of it is you just have to have a sense of where you are and you have to understand their dynamics. And again, I would recommend, if you're going to a small community hospital or any other hospital, try to get in touch with someone who is in the hospital, a resident specifically, and ask them, is there anything unique about the program that I should know about? That's what I would suggest. not a generic question, "Hey, what is your program like? What should I say in the interview?" Ask them, what is something unique about your program that it should know? So it gives them a specific question they can answer. And then they will tell you, "Hey, man, we are so good in this work, or we are excellent in doing clinical work, and you should stick to that."
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, definitely. So I would think, yeah, you could definitely present. It's a bad experience if you had a program which did not really, entertain, or even, was that a program director, or was that a resident that was interviewing, or what was it?
Program director.
Okay, that will be interesting.
And he asked me the question, why do you think research is that much important for patient care?
Okay, that's really not good.
That tells you that his intentions towards
no, but the way Dr. Sharams talked about it, I think that is excellent. You could say that that's something I bring, and I'm really excited about it. That's why I wanted to mention it. But surely, yes, I think I could be equally good as a clinician, as a researcher. But I think this is what I bring to the program, and I can offer my services at any that I have all the experiences that I have gained. Just to share with you, I was doing some research too during my time when I was interviewing, and although it was of course physical, I used to print out the latest abstract that I wrote, or any journal article that I wrote, that we're working on, and I used to bring that in a single page, and in a clear plastic folder. And that, what I used to do initially, I would bring it. Hey, this is just something that I was working on. Just want to share this with you as an update to my CV. Exactly what I would say if I remember from 10 years ago.
And what I did, I made a PowerPoint briefly of all my abstracts, and because this was virtual. So what you are saying, printing out was not an option. So I just made a brief PowerPoint of my presentation and poster and publication, and I just showed them during the interview.
Perfect. Yeah, you do what you can, and Dr. Sharm, clearly he articulated exactly what you should be doing. That, hey, I'm here, and I'm ready, and I can do whatever is needed. And yeah, most people will like it. I don't know about that program director. That's funny. Okay, so we have a question. What is an appropriate response to why did you not consider doing residency in your own country? Dr. Heather, I think we should give you the opportunity to just talk about it. What do you think? Hopefully, Dr. Heather, are you around? Yes, Dr. Heather, what do you think? We can talk about this, and we can discuss this together. How are you today?
I'm good, but the thing is, I haven't quite prepared my answer for that question yet. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. It's just one of those things that I found online when I was browsing different questions that they asked during these interviews. And this was quite awkward for me because I am a graduate from 2019, and I've had 2 years since now. And they would want to know what I've been doing this entire time. And I've only been in non-training jobs this entire time. So how do I justify that? Why? Because wouldn't it be a negative that I've had so much time where I didn't pursue any specialty training or what?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Dr. Sharon.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I'm very interested in question because when I was preparing, there was a big question mark about this question. So in my time, we actually prepared for this question a lot. And in my own training, I used to verbalize like, well, this is what I'm going to say. But my experience over the past so many years, this question is actually rarely asked to begin with. Very rarely a program director or anyone in the faculty asks this question, because now, I'm not saying now, it's been for 50 years and more than 50 years, there are so many candidates who come to US and they completely understand that US healthcare system is much better than any other system in the world. So they understand that, and it's very normal that they get IMGs from around the world. So they don't even ask this question anymore. Number one, that's point number one. So you shouldn't be too worried about this question. Number two, the answer to this question will be very generic. Like, we all know that US has the most advanced healthcare system. You say guideline-based treatment, more advanced. And the biggest thing that you should focus on is that you have resources to research and to advance healthcare in every field. And US is a leader in research and advancement in healthcare, right? Hands down. So I want to be in an environment where we are leading the way rather than following someone else, right? So if you're in US, you are the leaders and other countries actually follow healthcare. That's pretty standard. So that's your answer. What I want to caution you from is there's 2, 3, 4 red flags that you can mention, and that would kind of be a very, very negative for your for your interview. First of all, you should never mention that you were in a training program and you cut down your training program just to come here, or for the past 2 years, all you were doing is planning to come to US, or like you spent these 2, 3 years just preparing for the steps. Those are the clear-cut no's. You should never mention that. Other than that, they understand that you wanted to come to the US and you prepared for it and you came here. But I've seen people mention, oh man, I did 1.5 years of internal medicine training, then I got interviews, and that's why I'm here. That's like a very negative comment, and that's very common. People do it, but it shouldn't be done. Honestly, if you're in a training program somewhere else and you just cut short your training just to come here, kind of gives you a bad vibe that this guy is not committed to what he's doing, right? But if you're doing other jobs and you have some experience and you come in US and applying for residency, that's completely fine and encouraged. So that's not a problem. So what, again, those are 2, 3 things that you don't mention, and I explained to you the things that you should mention.
I have a question here because I was doing my FCPS training in Pakistan, but I got married and I have to come here. So what's my answer?
So you came here for marriage.
Okay,
that's fine. You came here for family reasons. You did not stop your FCPS just to come to US. Right.
Yeah, definitely. Just to circle back just a little bit, Dr. Heather's. So yeah, don't worry about that. And they already called you for the interview. They already are looking into you. They're already interested in you. So just be confident. And yeah, as Dr. Sharam said, I think the other question you were talking about, I think the other question you were talking about was that you were not involved in any clinical activity. So you can always say, you have to be, of course, honest in that. And you can always say that, I still believe I'm an excellent clinician, and I've my experience behind that, even though the last 2 years I have not really been doing much, but whatever I've been doing, I think that has provided me great value and a great experience that I will definitely be carrying forward in my life as well as during residency. So always, I think you can always spin it in a positive manner, if that was also part of your question. Okay. All right. So let's go over another question. And let me go through my list of questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
So if they ask, what are the challenges you think physicians are facing in the US healthcare system? So what should we mention?
So let's have you take a jab at it. What do you think?
I'm not sure.
Okay, that's okay. Well, I would say it's not. They probably won't ask a question like this. They will because they don't want to. I mean, you could say there are a couple of there are always issues with any healthcare system anywhere in the world. One is, of course, the amount of patients that need to be served and amount of clinicians available to serve those patients. Then you can talk about, okay, as with everywhere on earth, medical care is also expensive in the US, and that is one aspect of the US healthcare system that people do talk about, that it leads to a lot of bankruptcies among the general population because of medical bills. That is definitely one aspect that is not the best about the healthcare system. Then you can say there's always a question about work-life balance potentially. But I'm not, you can definitely say that I'm not too concerned about that, because I'm here to learn and be active and learn as much as I can through, whatever I'm doing. And then you can say, okay, in the US healthcare system, there are disparities in amount of how certain people get care, maybe in a big city environment, in a community style setting. There's an impression that people don't get as good a care as maybe a more academic oriented center. But these are all aspects that are not clear cut, but these are general aspects that people talk about. but I'm here to, put my best foot forward and learn from any experience that I have. So just, just say a few things, and you can always say that there are challenges, and everywhere on earth there are challenges, but that doesn't stop anybody, and that certainly won't stop me.
You came up with very good points. I like that. Thank you.
And honestly, if you have been in US only for like 1 or a couple of years, I would say that,
10 years.
I'm not about specifically about you. I'm saying in general, the candidates, IMGs, all the IMGs can just mention, like, I'm certainly no expert in US healthcare system because I just arrived. But from what I know and what I've heard is a disparity between, the rich and the underserved. And as Dr. Khan mentioned, like, a spirit in a way that that's all I know. But of course, there might be more challenges, as there are challenges in all the healthcare systems. And Dr. Khan, if I may, there are a few questions that I wanted to discuss about, or at least let the candidates know that they might be coming their way, so that at least they can prepare. I think we briefly touched upon some of the behavioral questions, right? So 2-3 questions that they can be asked in different from a in so many different ways is, one is, tell me about your weakness. That's pretty standard now. I guess most of you should be preparing for that. Second is, tell me about a conflict and what did you do to resolve the conflict? That question will be asked in a way that, tell me about a conflict between you and your colleague, or a conflict between 2 colleagues that you heard of and you did something, or it could be a conflict between a physician and patients or a family member, or it could be something that they are discussing something on an elevator and someone heard that, and that becomes an ethical question. So it could be spent in 2-3 different ways, but one version or another would be something related to conflict and how did you solve. And third is, tell me about a challenging case, like a challenging clinical case, and how did you resolve? Those are 3 standard basic questions that they could be asked in a behavioral model of questions.
All right, excellent. So yeah, I think definitely your strengths and weaknesses, that is one, definitely. And then how do you handle conflict? Very typical, very historical question. And we already talked about the case. So yeah, so let's talk about let's talk about weaknesses. Let's talk about weaknesses. So normally the question is, tell me about your 3 weaknesses. Normally that's how people seem to frame it. What do you think, Dr. Sharam?
Yeah, it could be like, as I said, it could be framed like, in some way or another, like, tell me about someone who doesn't like you, or something about like, what are your weaknesses? And so you should have prepared what are you going to say for this question. What I would recommend is, like, we can ask, I think we try to give the floor to the candidates that we can ask this question to them, but I don't know if anyone is volunteering. But what I can suggest is that you can say that, be very genuine. It should be a genuine weakness. It shouldn't be, oh, I'm too honest, or I'm too hardworking, or I'm too. Even if you say that, explain it in a way that it looks genuine. So, for example, if you're saying, I just listen to everyone, and I get along with everyone, and I cannot say no to someone, then spin it in a way that is causing you emotional stress. Okay, you listen to someone, but that it gives you emotional stress, and that becomes a weakness for you, right? Or you don't have enough time to focus on something else. Spin it in a way that it's a proper weakness. I've seen this, like, whenever I've asked this question, most of the people make it in a way that they make one of their strengths sound like their weakness. It's not the case. First of all, it has to be a genuine weakness. And we all love to see people who are humans and they understand that this is their weakness, instead of someone who thinks that they don't have any weakness at all. So they think they're superhumans, right? So all of us have weaknesses. So this by itself is a strength, that you know of your weakness, number one, whatever it is. Of course, it should not be like a red flag that you gamble or something like that. But other than that, it has to be a genuine weakness. And what I want to mention is that please focus on what you have done to improve. Don't just stop at this is my weakness. For example, I'm bad at public speaking, or I have a problem with, I have a fear of this or that. What have you done so far to improve yourself? And where are you now? For example, this was my weakness. I have worked this much to improve. I still feel this is my weakness, and I will continue to work on it. This is the way that I would answer this question.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think you mentioned one aspect. If we can give people a bit of nuggets. One thing you can say, I mean, a lot of people feel. I felt, hey, I always felt that although I've succeeded in many levels, I've always felt that I need to struggle hard or study more or spend more time studying than maybe my peers. But I've realized that, and I've always, thought about how I could improve upon my own self-learning process during medical school. I've found that to be a challenge in a way, but I've always succeeded, and I've tried to develop my schedule and my goals, and I try to organize myself so that even though I feel that, hey, I may be learning I may be learning slower than some of my colleagues, but I'm still able to come up to their level or even exceed many of their levels. So, I mean, that's possibly is a genuine weakness. Then put something else, if you want to talk about it, is that I'm sometimes too timid. Sometimes take a little bit longer time than possibly other people to make a decision. But I believe that could be a positive as well. That I don't want to make the wrong decision, but I've seen that it being a little timid and being a little careful. It, I consider that a weakness, but I also consider that subsequently I've made better decisions as I've gone through my life, and I consider this a weakness, but still I think this has helped me come all the way over here and in the future as well. So yeah, think of something that you can relate to and you can talk about. And yeah, the other thing is you can say, yeah, I've known myself to be a bit shy. I've known myself to be an introvert, and sometimes that may be considered weakness. I do consider that to be a little bit of a weakness. And I know you have to be an extrovert in certain situations. So I've realized and I've learned to control my emotions and my communication skills, so that when I know that I'm being an introvert, I've come to realize when to take the action and when to put the step forward when I need to. And I'm constantly working on this, but I feel that I'm making strides in my in my approach to people. So I mean, something genuine, something that you could other people, the interviewer, can potentially also relate with. But I mean, it has to be genuine. Pick out a few things, and it's always, as Dr. Sharon mentioned, that you are working on it. So that should be adequate enough.
I have something to add here. Can we say I pay too much attention to details and sometimes it takes my more time in completing a task? Is it a weakness?
So again, if attention to detail is a quality, right? So if you're making it a weakness, make sure you stress that, okay, it has caused me a lot of problems because then I'm delayed at my work. Make sure you mention it in detail, like my colleagues are done with their work and sometimes my attendings are asking me and I'm late with my notes and things like that. It has to be a genuine weakness. It cannot be like I'm pay attention to the detail and that's my weakness. Then explain what this weakness has led to. This weakness has led to delay in something, delay in patient care. It has led to delay in your presentations, or it has led to delay in your note writings or something like that. Otherwise, it's not a weakness.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was good to cover this question. It do have some comments. What would you bring to our program?
Yeah.
I think that is could be a very typical question, but I think that will be covered in your CV. I think they're looking for you. I think they already know you. And then the question about tell me about yourself is important. And all you will do with this question, if they do ask this question, you will highlight your strengths and say that I don't want to boast about myself. And I know there are many excellent candidates that you are interviewing today, but I do believe that I'm a very able candidate, and what I bring, and you can see in my CV about my experiences. I don't want to regurgitate all that you already have, but I do bring this set of experiences of my clinical background, as well as my always an eager learner and a fast adopter and I can I believe I'm a good as a street smarts individual as well, and I could potentially be an asset to your program in any sense. And I also have this academic experiences with my research that I do believe could be helpful. So basically, sum it up in a nice manner, exactly what you are able to bring. And of course, don't be overly arrogant. Always, I believe it's probably you say that, okay, I do believe I'm a good candidate. I don't want to belittle anybody else. And I'm pretty sure that there are so many other good candidates that you're interviewing, but I do bring a lot of value to this program.
Yeah. So if I can add one thing, I completely agree with Dr. Khan. Like this is, of course, this is a question about your strengths, but this is actually one time that you can really go borderline towards pride. Like at that point, be very confident and explain who you are. This is the question. They're just giving the floor to you. Okay, what do you think about yourself? The strengths. So at that time, we should be very prepared, but we should be very confident. Okay, I'm this great clinician, and I have this experience with me, and I think I'll be a great asset to you. Something like that. But at that time, you should be very confident.
I would like to share something here from my experience of interview last year, because I have been in US for about 12 years. And I mean, my CV is like 10 pages long. I have done so much things, so much clinical and research work. And I think that became a negative for me in that interview. Because in the end, program director said, we are looking for someone who is ready to be, who is teachable. We can teach that person. So that was a negative for me. So what should I do then?
No, that's definitely one thing. Like whoever you are, you're going to the residency program, you should be teachable. The faculty or the attendings, the program director should feel that you are teachable. But that does not mean that you cannot highlight your strengths. You can highlight your strengths and still be teachable. You say like, I have been an excellent physician. I've done this. I'm good at research and things like that. And I'm excited because I know that I can, and I hope that I can function well in your program and I can improve myself and become a better clinician. This is why you're there. So you have to end in a way that you say that, I'm excited about the residency, what the residency has to bring, because it would really help me become a better clinician. That's why you're there. It will give me additional set of tools to be a great clinician or a good clinician.
But for me, I felt like it was a negative for me. Mentioning all my work in the US, I don't know.
So no, I think I think you should always see what the residency director is your employer, and they're employing you to do a certain job. Yes, in the process, they wish to educate you, but they want you to do a certain job. And what is your job? Your main job is to see patients. Your main job is to be able to help the program take care of the patients in their community. So you should always, highlight your clinical abilities, that I will start on the ground running. I will from day one with my experiences, and I will use all of my experiences in my academic experience, as well as my prior clinical experiences, as well as my ability to mold to any environment, to take care of the patient, my patients, and my research experience will surely come in handy. And with the activities that you have mentioned in your briefings, I look forward to playing an active role in all of these activities as well. So yeah, I'm not. Yeah, so anything that's totally irrelevant, yeah, maybe they will say, oh, this lady is even more experienced than me in this situation. But you say this is my strength, and I will play my part in being an active member of this cohort, including patient care, as well as anything else that's needed that I can bring to the table.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll quickly jump on this question that we got here. I came across an ethic question, if we can discuss here. You learned from your best friend that she was involved in a hit and run accident one night when she had too much drink and had hit a person crossing the street. She feels badly about this incident. What do you do, if anything? If I was to answer, I am so sorry for what you are going through. I can definitely understand your worry. What do you think about reaching out to the local police? I think this is a, not probably something like this may not come up because it's not directly related to your residency. One thing does come up is that if you know a colleague who is drinking and that drinking is affecting patient care, then that is something I think the answer should be, if you're seeing that you see a colleague who is significantly drunk or something similar, who is compromised from any drugs or any hallucinogens, then you should definitely say that, yeah, that is something not proper. And if you try to talk to the person that, hey, can you step aside because this is going to affect your patient care? If they don't listen to you at that point, then you can certainly go to your supervisor and talk about it. So I think that should be the stepwise answer. If you're thinking that an individual, a colleague is compromised and that is affecting patient care, then the first thing you should do is potentially talk to that person that, hey, this is what I'm noticing. Please, I think you should refrain at this current point. And if they refrain, then it's well and good. And if they want to talk to your superior or whatever. But in any case, if this issue is not resolved, then you should be going to your program director or your senior resident to escalate the matter. I think that should be it for then. Next, do you want to go into your next question, Dr. Sharam, about your, I think you talked about the strengths, or what was, you talked about that, right?
Yeah, strengths and the conflict resolution.
Conflict resolution, exactly.
Yeah. So again, the behavioral model questions would focus more on those sort of questions. And I think we mentioned this earlier in the last series as well, that some of the programs are going more and more on the route of asking more and more behavioral questions. And they have like this 1, 2, 3, 4 questions written down and given to all the attendings. And they have different questions, and they would ask each and every candidate the same question, and they would see what they have answered, and based on that, they would rank candidates. But again, it is not that prevalent right now, and it's only happened in few hospitals, but it might start to be more prevalent because ongoing research has shown that behavioral model questions may lead to the programs choosing better candidates. So how would you answer that question? So first of all, you have to pay attention to what they're asking. If they're asking about a conflict that happened between you and your colleague, then you have to be very direct and you have to discuss something that happened in your past. And if they're asking about a conflict in general, then you can have your question picked in a way that it could be a conflict between two colleagues and you stepped in and helped them, or it was a conflict between a physician and a patient and you stepped in and helped out. So what I would mention is that, again, most important thing in that question or in that discussion should be, you should not be highlighting yourself as the one who was right or as the one who did the higher moral ground and things like that, and the other one was on the wrong. If anything, either both of you were at fault or it was your fault more than his fault, and this led to the conflict. So I'll give you an example that you were stressed out from some family situation. For example, your mother, your spouse, your kid, someone was ill at home and you were at work. And in that particular scenario, you kind of snapped at your colleague for something, and that led to an incident. And later on, you realize, okay, this is what happened. And you came back and you said sorry to that individual. And you said, hey, man, this is because I was stressed out and something like that. And I realized it was my mistake and I'm sorry. And that's how you handle it. You handle it before it reached to your supervisor. Or if it has reached into your supervisors already, then you explain and you say sorry and go ahead, move on. You don't have to blatantly say it was your mistake. You can you can come up with something that actually happened to you, and it was kind of a problematic for both of you guys, that you were both stressed out and things happened, and later on you guys realized and you solved it out. The main take home point from that is, never put someone else down that is not even in the meeting, and you're mentioning someone, some XYZ, and you saying he was the bad guy and he led to the incident. That's the main thing that you're looking for, that the candidate is honest and he understands his shortcoming and how to resolve the conflict. That's my 2 cents on that.
Right. Yeah. So you could probably add a few things like, okay, in the heat of the moment, especially in a very stressful environment where everybody is trying to operate at their best and everybody's looking at the patient, and there could be chances for disagreements to arise, and it could happen that one or the other may lose temper. But I've learned to realize that even if something happens, first of all, my interactions with individuals don't usually lead to conflicts, and I try to be very calm and collective, at least on the work environment. But if something like that happens, I tend to realize very soon that either I made a mistake or somebody else may have made a mistake, and we know that we have to be professional at all times, and patient care is most important. And to resolve, as we are colleagues, I've realized that it's best to accept the mistake or talk it over and let bygones be bygones, and try to resolve it amicably there and then. If for some reason, if it's a repeat episode, and for some reason, if a colleague, if I feel is not has repeated the same mistakes, and I have tried a few times to confront in a professional manner, and it has not led to an amicable solution, then I will surely feel that is something I can potentially communicate to my superiors. Something similar. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. And one other thing I want to mention, like all of these questions, your weaknesses and the conflicts that you have been to, you should never be blank to the answers to this question. Like if you have worked in any hostile environment, conflicts are bound to happen. And if for some reason you don't have an answer to that, and you say, man, I don't remember any conflict, I wouldn't do that. And for some reason you say, oh, I don't know what my weaknesses are, again, that's a red flag for me. So always be prepared for those questions, because those things are bound to happen. And similarly, always be prepared for the weakness question, because you're bound to have weaknesses, right?
Right. Okay. So I think we talked about, the one thing that I'm worried about is people definitely are not preparing the question, the interesting case. So we talked about that earlier. The other way sometimes programs spin it is that they put forward a medical question. They ask you about a case. So, and that has, I remember that happened to me twice back in the day. And so same, you should proceed with the same style as if you are presenting a case. And how would you evaluate as you would normally do? And I believe everybody has, at least within their final year or their internship, to how to take a case from the top, like we talked about, from the chief complaint to past medical history, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, not to bore the interviewer, but you should always go for, the first investigations, the first steps, and follow the whole procedure that we have been taught and we have practiced throughout. So they could ask you for a case, or they could present a case to you. So take a deep breath, organize in your mind how you feel that you should be answering and responding. Sometimes, just go step by step. In that case, sometimes they may want to see if you know what the next steps are, or what is the most likely next investigation that you should be performing, or what is the best treatment option for that individual. So again, every case could be different, but go step by step in the manner that we have been taught since medical school. So be calculated step by step. I think, what do you think, Dr. Sharam?
Yeah, completely agree with that.
Right. All right. Anybody has any further questions on this? I think we are reaching our time also. Anybody has any questions, they can relay. Otherwise, I will go through one or two more questions.
Yeah. Is it okay that I mention like one or two questions?
Definitely, yes.
So one of the things that people tend to do badly is on the interaction with the residents. So the interaction with the residents is important. So there are two ways that you're going to interact with them, either a pre-interview dinner or during the lunch, right? So how to interact with them is important too. First of all, your focus, the interaction towards
having
them.
These lunches or get-togethers remotely?
So sometimes they give you a voucher, and they just you are in a Zoom class that everyone is just sitting and eating. The residents have their own lunch, and you are sitting in front of them, and you are expected to have lunch, or even if you don't have lunch, that's fine. That's basically the dedicated time with the residents through Zoom. So there might be a big screen, and all of the residents are seeing you. So whoever is talking, basically, similarly, whoever is talking, like when you talk, your picture comes up, right? So whoever is talking, the picture will come up, and they will talk to you. So, for example, they would first of all, in first few minutes, they would tell you about themselves and things like that, like, hey, so you guys have any questions to us? Feel free to ask questions, things like that. So this is your time to ask questions for them. First of all, do not be too enthusiastic, and you are the one who's just hogging the time and just asking the questions, and you're the one who is the limelight. Give appropriate time to everyone. So if you feel everyone is quiet and you think there's time for you to speak, you can go ahead and speak and initiate the conversation, but don't be over enthusiastic and be, what you call it, and steal the limelight from everyone. And then two, three things that are red flags that you should avoid is that you should not repeat the question that was already answered. For example, someone at the start of the meeting had asked, can you tell us about where do you live? And you come up and ask the same question, means that you are not paying attention. And you are only worried about your interaction with them, and you are not even paying attention to what others have asked. And what sort of questions should we ask to the residents? My personal advice is that you should refrain from asking too many questions about the schedule, like, how's your schedule like, how many calls you do, because the schedule is a fluid thing, it keeps changing, and they might be confused what to say and what not to say. And I've done this, and then even if they're overworked, they wouldn't say that I'm overworked, and it will be very awkward for them to explain that. In my opinion, don't focus on the schedule, number one. Number two, you should never ask how much to get compensated, or do they do moonlighting, and do you get additional compensation for moonlighting. On a resident visa, you are not supposed to moonlight, and that's not a question for you to ask. Green cards and the nationals can moonlight in some hospitals, but you can ask them when you get there. In the residency, during the time that you're doing the interview, especially the residency interview, I wouldn't ask those questions. Secondly, the questions that you can ask them should be more oriented towards their life in general and their work life as well. For example, I would encourage you to ask questions about what do they do in their free time. For example, do they hang out with each other? After work, do they go together? Do they go to lunches, sports games and things like that? And where do they live? Do they live close to the hospital? What do they like in the area? What do they like about the hospital in general? Or what do they like about the area that they live in general? Those are going to be very fruitful questions. They would lead to interesting conversations with them. For example, they would tell you, hey man, last month we had this bowling tournament and we had so much fun there. Or a couple of months ago, we had this dinner, we had so much fun there, and things like that. And asking them about their, the place that they live is perfectly fine. Again, do not jump on the, aspect of how much the cost of living is. For example, don't ask the residents how much they're paying in rent. If you are concerned about it, okay, you should be concerned about it. You can Google, you can put it online, okay, cost of living in Chicago, this area. You can find out easily. You don't have to ask the resident. But again, this is a negative question. I've seen this question asked way too many times. It's a little awkward. Residents themselves don't know how much the other resident is paying when they're living. So for you as an interview candidate to go and ask them, what do you pay for your living and your, housing situation is not that, encouraged, in my opinion.
All right. Yeah. A question is coming to my mind, and I got two more questions in the chat about pre-match. What do you think about certain programs tend to offer pre-matches? They're generally community-based programs whose may not have fellowships down the line, but there are certain programs they tend to offer people with higher scores. Maybe scores are not a big deal right now, but what do you think about pre-match? Should people get the pre-match or not? Big question.
It depends on how strong of a candidate you are. If you are a strong candidate and you have already received so many interviews, and the place that's offering you a pre-match is like iffy and sort of on the borderline of being malignant, then I would hold off. But again, it's a personal decision. It is a personal decision. And again, honestly, it's a brutal reality of the world that we live in. It again depends on how much are you willing to gamble on this. Honestly, if you are someone who really needs to go into residency and you cannot afford to stay one more year off of residency, and you got a decent offer from a decent hospital, I personally would take it. If you have struggled for a couple of years and you applied for a match and now this is the time a hospital is giving you interview and you're not really sure, I would consider taking it.
Yeah, just think about it. And if not too many interviews, take the pre-match. Many interviews. I've seen people with many interviews offer pre-match, didn't do the pre-match, didn't match. So it has happened. It has happened. So you just be very careful and see what your main goal is. What is your main goal?
And another important question, I think, is what to ask the program director, right, Dr. Khan?
Yes. Oh, yes.
That's another very important question.
Questions to ask.
Yeah, questions to ask the program director. That's again very important question. My 2 cents on this is, don't feel obliged at that point that you really have to ask a question to the program director. If you're not prepared and you don't feel confident that you should ask a question. For example, you can say, I had questions in my mind, but all the faculty and the residents and your presentation, all of my questions were answered. That's perfectly fine. And it's a good way to skip that part. For example, the program director would have shared some information about the data. It would have given you a brief presentation. Then during the interview, would have told you about the program, and the residents and everyone is talking about the programs constantly, right? So you can always say, man, I had so many questions, but I'm glad that my questions were answered. That's it, done. You're out of the question. But if you really have to ask something, be very smart in what are you asking your program director. Like, it has to be very precise question that you're genuinely interested in. For example, I can tell you what I used to ask is, like, I used to ask the program director, so, I like your schedule and everything that you have presented so far. I was just thinking, are there any major changes that you're thinking of the program in the next 3 years? Or are there any major changes that you have planned for your program in the next couple of years? So that tells you, okay, so he's thinking about getting match here. He likes everything in the program. He's thinking about his match. He wants to match in the program. And now he's thinking what he should expect different. That's, in my opinion, that was a very smart question. And I would encourage, if you don't have anything else, you can ask that question. And similarly, the other questions you ask, you can ask, what do you think are the biggest strengths of your program? That's a very generic question. It's not like a par question, I would say. I wouldn't highly encourage this question, but that's just a par question. What are the strengths of the program? Or you can even ask, like, if you're very confident about yourself, like, what do you think? Where do your residents match? Or what sort of fellowships your residents go into? That's also a par question. Again, first, I would refrain from asking any negative questions on the program if you don't have any. And then I can say that, you just say, I don't have any questions. If you then have to ask questions, those are some of the examples that you can say, and then you can think about other questions too. What do you think, Dr. Khan?
Definitely, yes. No negative questions, maybe generally open-ended questions. And definitely that you can say that, okay, I've all these questions have been answered. I had a few things, but I seem to be good. One thing you can potentially add in your armory of questions that you want to put in there, I'm always interested in knowing, well, the way you may want to spin it is, what do you think, as your role as a program director, what has been one of your achievements that you can share with me, and I would love to get to know you a little better from that standpoint. Something similar, or what have you? Do you have any? And it goes in line with Dr. Sharm's question also. Can you share a few exciting plans that you may have for the next coming years for the program that you are working on? So something similar, just to let them talk about how excited they may be about something that they're thinking about doing for the program, possibly, or again, what changes that you have, but what changes you feel are going to be coming around for this program in the next few years. Definitely a very good question. I think a couple of questions you can have up your sleeve, and you can always, of course, say that, hey, okay, I think I've answered most of my questions. Definitely. So have something like that for anybody. It could be the chief resident potentially asking you the question, same type of question that what are you excited about for this program as your role as a chief resident, is something you can ask, or the same question you could spin it to anybody, to the program director as well. So, yes.
Can I ask a question if you have time?
Sure, yeah.
In a community program, is it a good idea to mention that I want to become a hospitalist and I'm not interested in fellowship? How should we take this?
Well, if that's what you feel, then I think it's okay. I think you say that I feel that I would be a good clinician, whether I'm doing one thing or the other. And of course, they need hospitalists too. There's a need for such also. So yeah, and I believe that the work life, the schedule can definitely suit my sort of my sort of game plan for my work-life balance. Yeah, you can definitely be positive on that. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, again, being an academic hospitalist as a goal would work in almost any program. Even if it's a university, big university program, and you want to be academic hospitalist, perfectly fine. Community hospital, you want to be academic hospitalist, perfectly fine. So never feel the pressure to say I have to go to a fellowship and things like that. You say I want to be academic hospitalist because I love internal medicine. That's it. You are going into internal medicine residency program. Bread and butter of internal medicine residency is internist. So you say yes, I am excited about the internal medicine and I want to continue in the internal medicine. I want to be academic hospitalist. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, question from Dr. Akil. Any COVID-related interview questions? They can probably ask COVID-related questions. I think if you had experience with COVID, I think you should be able to answer those questions appropriately, whatever they ask. But be genuine, be yourself, be genuine, and again, keep in mind that always keep the patient's interests interest to be in the forefront of your answer. Next, if a PD asked, tell me about a book you have read, and you are a person who does not read novels or books other than academics, school related. Huh. Well, tell them I read a lot of books. Well, I mean, I don't know if that's a reasonable question, but they can potentially ask as a spin-off or a psychological question. But just say that, recently I've been preparing for this, so I haven't had a chance to read any novel per se, but I've always been a person in the past who used to read novels and nonfiction material. But I'm focused, much more focused right now on my academics, and my goal is to get into to a residency program that fits my needs, and I'm very goal oriented. And when the time comes, I will surely be picking up some of my old novels or my favorite authors, and I would love to share with you in the next coming years. Something similar. I don't know. Yeah, should I say first aid?
Yeah. So, and honestly, I would encourage, if you have not read any books recently, I would encourage, just pick up like, if you have time, go to a library and pick up a book, to be honest. Just say, this is something that I just started. If they ask you about a book, I'm just in the middle of reading this book. In the past, I was passionate about something. And yeah, as you said, in the meanwhile, I've been so busy with my, residency, with my preparation and boards and things like that, I didn't really have time. And every once in a while, when I have time, I read this book or something like that. Yeah, again, in Pakistan, honestly, it's very common to not have read books outside your curriculum. But you have to understand, in US, they start this try to instill this in your kindergarten. So my daughter is in kindergarten, and they've already recommended so many books for her to read outside of her curriculum. So this is something that's expected out of a normal human being living in US, that they would be reading some books out of their academics. But again, I understand, most of us in Pakistan, you don't really have.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I think Dr. Sharam has some internet issues, so at least it's not everybody else.
I would just like to mention that last year I specially read a book before my interview, and that was Make Your Bed.
Yeah.
Make Your Bed.
Yeah.
That's a lesson I need to learn. Okay, yeah, Dr. Sharma, I think you got cut off a little bit, but I think we got the gist of your answer for a book. But yeah, again,
Great.
If you haven't read a book recently, don't say that you did. Then they may ask you questions about it. Because in my CV, I had written that I play carom board, right? And some Gori didn't know about it, so she asked me about it. So anything in your CV is an open deal, okay? Anything in your CV that you write. So again, if you haven't read a book, don't talk about it. Just spin it like I mentioned earlier. It's okay. Say that you've been traveling, you've been international, and it has not been one of your priorities right now, but in the past I used to do that. Everybody in Pakistan, read Risale and all that, digest and all that in the past. So you can.
I think so. The culture of the digest is dying down as well, to be honest.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, times have changed, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Somebody has a question. Can I say this is a weakness I have and I have been working on it? No. I mean, it's not a weakness. No, I don't think not reading a novel, nonfiction, or even a historical fiction or something else. It's not necessarily a weakness. No, I wouldn't say it's a weakness. Okay, maybe the last question. Maybe I know we want to respect people's time. Okay, I think we can talk about this. Tell me about a mistake that you made and how did you handle it? I think that is what do you think, Dr. Sharam?
Yeah, again, that again comes into the realm of those behavioral type questions that, again, some of the programs would be focused on the behavioral questions, but almost all the programs would ask you at least one of these questions. At least one of these questions, either a mistake or your weakness or a conflict. I think this is fair game. So
Right.
how to answer this question is, again, we have all made mistakes in our personal life as well as in our professional lives, right? So you think about what you want to mention, whether you want to mention a mistake that you made in your personal life or you want to explain a mistake that you made in your professional life. So again, you have two options, and then you pick a professional life mistake. Most of us, I think, would like to pick a professional life mistake rather than a personal life mistake. But whatever you want to pick, professional life mistake again should be a proper mistake. For example, you forgot to order a CT scan on a patient who came with chest pain or looked like PE or something like that. Again, do not be wishy-washy that I could have ordered this, but I didn't order this. It has to be something that was completely slam dunk mistake. Like someone looked like a PE and you didn't order a CTPE, something like that. Like I'm talking about CT chest for pulmonary embolism, something like that you have missed. Or a patient came with chest pain, there was an EKG findings that I didn't pick up on. So it has to be a proper mistake that you made. It doesn't necessarily have to lead to an adverse patient outcome. For example, you forgot to look at the EKG, something like that, but your colleague picked up on it, and he's the one who picked up on that and then told you, and then you proceeded from there. But you learned a lot from that you understood that every time a patient comes with you with a chest pain, even if the EKG, whoever has read EKG says it's normal, you should look at the EKG yourself, something like that. For example, if you talk about EKG, you have to make sure that you say, oh, I didn't look at the EKG myself, or things like that. Number one. Number two, if you're talking about pulmonary embolism, oh man, next time, hopefully I would never forget to look for a pulmonary embolism in someone who is acutely short of breath, right? The point is, it has to be a mistake made by you, doesn't have to lead to adverse patient outcomes. So it's a win-win. You made a mistake, patient didn't get harmed, and you learned something out of it. That's how I would present it.
Yes, definitely. Just maybe you can say, okay, I forgot to, patient came in with a stroke. I forgot to order a follow-up imaging study, but one of my colleagues picked that up, and we eventually did order a CAT scan or an MRI. Just something that's realistic, and it's probably true. One thing one of my seniors in where I work said that, hey, we never make mistakes. If we make mistakes, we get sued. But it's okay. You can mention definitely a few things. Something got a bit delayed, or there's a patient intubated. You forgot to put it in ABG to follow up on change vent settings. But you realize the respiratory tech reminded you, and although it was possibly an hour's delay, we were able to get that ABG in and do the proper adjustments. Or the leg was swollen, I got a little busy and I forgot to really order a lower extremity DVT, lower extremity Dopplers, and it got swollen even more, and the patient complained about pain in that leg, and then I realized, oh, I missed ordering that lower extremity Doppler, so I ended up ordering it, and luckily no real harm was done, and we picked it up and we started the treatment as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And you know,
exactly. Yeah. So the point is that you should make sure that it was a mistake. Some people try to spin it in a way that, oh, I could have ordered it, but I didn't order it. Make sure it was something, there was clear-cut guidelines that you should have done, but you didn't do. I would personally recommend the patient was not harmed and you learned something out of it. Right, Dr. Khan?
Yeah, just definitely. And then maybe you can say, okay, again, the EKG, you didn't look at it yourself. Very common. And what you can say is that all I've learned through my mistakes is that you have to be very diligent, and in medicine you can never go wrong if you do all the basics right, and you look at everything, you check everything, and you make sure you do your basics right, and that should that's what I've learned is the best way to approach medicine. Keep on doing the basics right. So maybe at the end of your answer. Yeah, I think that was a good question to talk about, mistakes. All right. So I think we will be ending this session. We've gone beyond our limit. Hopefully we all learned from each other's answers. Please share with us any questions we may want to consider in the future. And you think these type of sessions are useful, let us know, and we can look to see if we can potentially arrange any further sessions. Thank you so much for joining. Inshallah, we will talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.